Previously on balls.co.za.
I have Jonathan Kaplan. Hello, Jonathan.
Are you, Blades?
I'm very good, and you?
Awesome, world class.
That's great. Are you enjoying your retirement?
Enjoyment is a strong word. It presents a few challenges because I'm trying to redefine my space now, but yeah, it was the right time to get out, Blades.
That's okay. The right time to get out. Well, I mean, I've also got to find the right time to get out. But I don't have to. Luckily, I don't have to run around the park. Is it a question of time to get out because you had done enough, or was it a good time to say, hold on a second, what is, I mean, okay, I don't know this. Is there a recommended age for referees to retire?
It varies. So in France, as an example, they don't allow you to carry on in the top flights after 45. I think internationally it's the same principle because they got a French manager of referees. So I don't think it's set in stone, but it's certainly something that, he's definitely of the opinion that someone who's 35 years old is in better condition than someone who's 45. In South Africa, it's not so much like that. It's just, there is a predominance at the moment of trying to get youth into a position where they can have reasonably lengthy careers. And, I found myself in a position where I was the oldest Super Rugby referee by 5 years, and certainly the oldest in South Africa by some way. So if you exclude Marius Jonker. Blades, it's not, there's nothing that's absolutely set in stone, but I sort of felt for me as well, once I got taken off the international panels at the end of 2011, there was really no, the writing was on the wall, and it was just a matter of time before, the inevitable took place. So I had to find a good enough time to exit. And I think, I had two very good seasons after 2011, and I was very grateful that I did the final in 2013. But for me, it was almost a perfect way to exit. So, so for me, it was the right time.
Yeah, and I suppose, at the height of your refereeing career, round about, let's say, 2007, from 2007 onwards, Jono, South Africa were competing, obviously 2007, you couldn't referee the World Cup final because they wouldn't have a South African referee in it. So, the time frame worked against you a little bit in terms of World Cup finals.
Yeah, look, Blades, I've got a slightly different take on it. When I started out reffing, I thought to myself, I'd like to be involved in Currie Cup because I thought that was sort of the pinnacle for me. And I still am so grateful that I had 161 opportunities to run out onto the field in the Currie Cup. Once I got my green and gold blazer, then obviously things change and you rejig your goals. And so I wanted to be a good test referee, and then I wanted to, be a great test referee. And I certainly was capable of doing a World Cup final, but for whatever reason, the ball didn't bounce my way. But I resolved quite a long time ago that, I wouldn't define my career by one game.
No, sure.
And really speaking, I think the mark of greatness is not about one game. It's about, delivering a standard over a long period of time, which will, define your career.
Okay. I can tell you guys and gals out there that I ran a clinic at the Wanderers every Saturday morning. Bakshi! And we had a whole lot of coach. Mickey Gerber actually was the original driving force behind it, but then we got Pippi Kaufman and Tati Faber and Don Clark and Sid Nomus. So just about every single coach that we had at our Saturday morning clinic had played at least provincial rugby. And Jonathan and his brothers used to come to our clinic. Why did you decide to become a referee?
Blades, I didn't really enjoy the physical side of especially the training that went into, match day and the playing of rugby. And also when I was at school, I was much smaller than most of the other blokes that I was competing against. So, I found my niche. I wanted to stay involved in the game. I got my nose broken playing athlone. I don't know if you remember athlone high.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, it was just a certainty. It was quite a good target as well, being Jewish and everything. And my mom recommended that I try refereeing, which I was always into that type of thing. I was always interested in the laws and how the game was being officiated, and typical of me, I always thought that I could do better than. And when after I got my first game, I realized how much I still had to learn about, the profession. But I was very happy to give it a go. And, I had a long career and, a long time to get to even just first division club rugby. And
yeah,
so
yeah.
I earned a lot of scars along the way, just trying to define what I was trying to do out there, which was actually in many respects, it was a good thing that I had that time.
Yeah, it is. Sometimes, well, I'm of the opinion that certain people should be fast streamed into higher levels of rugby. I think of Willie Schmidt and Chesney Thomas and one or two other former provincial players. And Willie Schmidt got points against him because he had started almost coaching a fourth league team, and they admonished him for sort of sorting out the front rows and that type of thing, which I thought was a bit short-sighted. I remember, Jonathan, being on the Wanderers committee when you refereed a game at Wanderers. I think you were about 17, and I meandered up to the cabbage patch, as they called it at the Wanderers, and you were refereeing the Sables, who were the old boys, against Kempton Park old boys.
It was actually Edenvale.
Oh, was
I
it?
remember the game.
Was
Yeah,
it Edenvale?
I
Okay.
remember
Well,
the game clearly.
I mean, most guys who thought that they would tell the referee what to do. By the time I got there, which was about 4 minutes into the game, two blokes from either side were in the cooler.
Yeah. Look, I must say, I had a pretty good record in general with not having to issue cards and trying to get player buy-in before the game, particularly as my career progressed. But in those days, it was quite difficult for me. As you can remember, I was a very young-looking 17-year-old. Most of these guys were old enough to be my dad. So I remember that game clearly, Blades, and I eventually had 6 guys in the bin, but it pretty much sorted itself out. And I remember the game actually flattening out a bit, and the protagonists enjoying the afternoon after that. After that was sorted out. I've actually mentioned that particular game in my upcoming book, which will be released in 2 months' time as well.
Okay, what's your book entitled?
The book's called "Call It Like It Is."
Yeah.
And it's really, it covers my, where I come from, how I got involved in rugby refereeing, how I worked my way through the ranks, how I got onto the South African panels, and then some of the stories attached to my actual career, with some of the games and some of the challenges that I faced along the way. And then finally, how I got taken off the international panels and how my career ended. Okay. So I think it'll be a good read for, it's a niche read for, rugby enthusiasts, and, hopefully it will do well.
Did you have a ghostwriter?
I did. We're just in the final stages of completing everything, putting the photos together and just making sure that all the nuts and bolts are in place. And it'll probably come out in time for Father's Day.
Who was your writer?
Mike Burr.
Mike?
Burr, B-E-H-R.
Oh, okay. Having been involved in writing a book, it's quite an undertaking, isn't it?
Blades, it's probably one of the most stressful things I've ever done. Because what I undertook prior to putting it down, I always wanted to write a book. Once I made it as a referee, I was always going to write a book, because I think my story is interesting, and I think in many respects, it's a triumph. And I didn't want that to get lost in the in the morass of all the other stories the good stories that take place in rugby. And so this was always going to happen. But I'll tell you, when I started out, this bloke said to me, what's your aim? Why are you doing this? And I think for me, it was about putting everything down in writing so that it can't get distorted. And also, I had a commitment towards integrity and making the book as real as possible. Um, and I think that for me was the challenge. I've mentioned some things in respect of my dad, the challenges that I faced with him, and we've gone past that as a father-son. But there were some areas of even that when I was growing up, which I've put in the book as well, just because I'm trying to make it as real as possible.
Yeah. Great. Well, I'm sure that you fans out there would be interested. The most capped international referee ever. And there are a few questions I want to ask you from a social point of view, not even social point of view. I even knew your grandmother, so it was part of life in growing up. But I've got let's just get down to the nitty gritty. What we're going to do with Jonathan, and I've got a whole lot of interactions here, Jonathan, which we will handle as best we can. Guys, the plan here is in many ways no name and no pack drill, because we're not here to crucify referees, as my screen goes blank. And the big thing is for us to I think get to understand the laws better, to understand how the modus operandi works. Because there are a few questions that listeners and viewers and I've had on a number of occasions, and we will touch on this. I'll lead into it a little bit later, Jonathan, as to what the disciplinary measures are against referees. Don't answer that, because we will be going into it. But were there one or two incidents over the weekend that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, Blades, look, it was a full action-packed weekend. We had some Six Nations games, which I thought were, by and large, very well refereed. And I thought they were exciting games to watch as well. It was a great advert. The last game, the Wales England game, was a great advert for Six Nations rugby, I must say. And the vilified man in the middle, from a South African perspective, was Romain Poit. And I thought he did a really good job in ensuring that game progressed as it did throughout the game without getting too heavy on his whistle. So I thought that went pretty well. And I thought Super Rugby produced some results, some surprise results. I think the Brumbies-Canes game was a difficult game to predict, but I thought the Brumbies came through pretty strong, and they showed that they can win away from home against quality opposition. And then, who would have predicted the Force giving the Rebels a hiding like they did? So that's probably the best they've ever played, best half of rugby they've ever played in their time in Super Rugby. I think the areas that I want to concentrate on was the Stormers and Crusaders game, which was in general, I thought, well refereed by Rowan Hoffman. But there was an area of the game which is not creeping into the game. It's actually been in the game, particularly in Super Rugby, for the last 3 or 4 years. And I don't feel that referees are on top of it. And it's having a considerable influence on the game. And that's the holding back and tackling of players who don't want to be involved in a post-tackle situation or a ruck situation. And they're getting taken out and held back by the attackers. And that is just happening over and over again. And I've got great respect for Jean de Villiers, not because he's South African and not because he's a Stormer, because that has nothing to do with my domain. But, he was eventually seen saying to the referee, look, just tell us what you want us to do, because we're not getting purchased from the fact we're not getting penalties in our favor. And then when we retaliate, you're going to do something against us for that type of thing. And, Rowan did pick one incident up early on in the game, which I thought was a fantastic decision, excellently explained to the players and the public, and the Stormers got their reward. But it happened numerous other times in the game where Dwayne Vermeulen, Skalkberger, Dion Fourie, etc., etc. I mean, there were many, Frans Malherbe. They were all held back at certain stages, and that holding back of those players prevents them from defending. It is the biggest blight on the game in Super Rugby at the moment. Never mind the confusion at the scrum or the little inaccuracies that often happen at the breakdown, which are, by the way, inevitable. It is the holding back of players that is causing huge frustration for particularly the South African teams.
Okay.
So that was the one area where I felt, and it happened in the Reds Cheetahs game in particular with Bo Robinson holding back a number of Cheetahs players as he drove through the post-tackle situation. Not much was made of it, but, I could clip numerous incidents that happened in that game as well. So I really feel that, the referee managers, the hierarchy, the bosses, they've got to get on top of this, whether it's an education process or whether, the TMO needs to get involved. But this is happening far too often and nothing is being done about it.
Okay. So in other words, you're saying that they've not been strict enough on obstructive play?
By the attacking team. So in other words, when a team's got the ball and they're taking the ball through phases or they're trying to create bust-ups and holes, they're driving through and taking away defenders who actually don't want to participate in that ruck. They want to be a pillar or post defender, and they are getting held back and taken out on a regular basis.
Now, in what way can an assistant referee get involved?
Oh, well, I mean, if he's looking for it, if he sees it, then he can put his flag out and make sure it doesn't happen. I mean, my recommendation, Blades, and I've said this for a long time, even when I was a referee, this type of thing was happening. Like I said, it's been happening for at least 3 years, and not enough is being done about it. They are aware of it. I know for a fact they're aware of it, but not enough is being done about it. So, I had a little interaction with Rowan Hoffman in the last 24 hours where I complimented him on the one that he did pick up, which, as I've said to the listeners, was an excellent decision, but it needs to be picked up more often because the results in the game are considerable.
Yeah.
And so what I'm suggesting is that they give a penalty for the first time it happens, and then upgrade it to a card the next time it happens, because at the moment the penalty happens maybe once a game, sometimes twice a game, but the actual infringements are happening more than 5, 6, 7, 8 times a game, and so the purchase of that is considerable.
Okay. Something to look out for. There has been I think it's Jevalt Nell who tweeted us and said, what is, and everybody, most South Africans will know who the referee on Saturday was. There was an incident where the Lions kicked an up and under, and Stefan Watermeyer chased the ball. Lwazi Mvovo went up for the ball, as did Watermeyer. Watermeyer was about a meter lower than Mvovo. Mvovo caught the ball, and he collided with Watermeyer and fell very awkwardly. In other words, he went on the horizontal and landed on his backside. Quite hard. And the referee immediately blew for a penalty. He sort of, there was quite a loud blast on his whistle, and then they took it to the TMO, and the referee watched it on the big screen. And quite clearly, Jono, Watermeyer was watching the ball when they went up. I saw it, and Bob Skinstad agreed with me, as did Robbie Kempson, that Stefan Watermeyer was watching the ball.
Yes.
When the referee made his decision, he said, penalty to the Sharks, you should have made sure that Mvovo landed safely. I saw the Lions coaching staff at the airport yesterday morning, and they were quite distressed about that, because at that point, the Lions were very much, they'd come back with 2 converted tries to be 7 points behind the Sharks when the Sharks were 30 points to 9 up. and it looked like the gamer was running away from the Lions completely. They got two converted tries. They suddenly back up, gaining a bit of steam. The incident happened, and the Lions got a penalty against them. What is your opinion on that?
Okay, so just first of all, in the lead up to this decision that you're talking about, the two Lions tries, there's almost certainly a case of definite truck and trailer and obstruction in the one where Tecklenburg uses the number 11 as a screen when the maul is clearly detached, and so there is a case of obstruction there. So I mean, if we want to look at dissecting everything, I think we need to be fair to both teams.
I know there's another incident I want to talk to you about that went against the Sharks.
Yes. Okay. So just in respect of this particular incident, if two players go up fairly, competing for the ball, both watching the ball, and one of them happens to land badly, that is not the fault of the player who has gone up competing for the ball fairly. There is a case to answer where a player looking at the ball does not, what's the word? He's not aware. He's not looking around him to see what else is happening. So you say, look up, I'm looking up at the ball. But if a player takes the space in the air ahead of you and you're not aware that he's in that space, then obviously there can be catastrophic outcomes. In this particular case, the way you've described it, it appears that both are looking at the ball, both go up together. One just happens to jump higher than the other one and come down awkwardly, in which case it would appear to be a play on, despite the fact that one may or may not have been injured. So, I mean, I hope I've described that as clearly as possible. Unfortunately, this particular incident I didn't see, so it's very difficult for me to make an accurate commentary on it.
Okay. Have you seen that truck and trailer incident?
Yes, I saw the two. Because this didn't result in a try, unfortunately, I didn't see the highlights. But on the highlights package, I did see the two tries.
Right. Interesting that, there was a line of Lions players who were running in front of Tecklenburg as the maul almost sort of disintegrated. There was it was almost comical in a way. There was this whole line of players. And then, frankly, in commentary, I wasn't quite sure where the ball was. And then suddenly a guy about 5 or 6 back, i.e. Tecklenburg, leaps up and he's got the ball.
Yeah. Look, Tecklenburg always had the ball, but the Lions, the maul actually, well, he detached from the front end of the maul, and then the number 11 who had got involved in the maul, he then ended up in front of Tecklenburg. And so when you're running forward with a player screening you, that is obstruction. It forces the tackler, I think it was Marcel Coetzee, but I stand to be corrected. It forces the tackler to then tackle from the side and not from the front, which would be an offensive tackle. So it's a normal case of obstruction that would necessitate a penalty at any other facet of the game. So, I think on review, I think that is an error and should have been a penalty.
Okay. We have a tweet here from Olivia, or Olivia. I think it's Olivia, is it? Do you feel that rugby players are starting to talk back to the refs more in this professional era?
Blades, look, I was reffing up until the end of last year, and I've felt that rugby's actually gone in the right direction. I don't mind, it's a professional sport, so we don't want to have a cultural change where we end up in the same space as football, and we know what problems they've got in respect of the respect that referees have in that sport. But at the same time, I think referees need to acknowledge sometimes that players have views, and as long as they're brought to the attention of referees in a fair way, I think there's nothing wrong with it. And I think sometimes even if players want to verbalize, sometimes other players rolling away, I don't have a problem with that either. I think it's a professional sport, and we need to acknowledge the shape and the nature of the game and how competitive it is. and how competitive some of the players are. So, I don't agree. I think that players are very disciplined. I think they're all winners. They all want to win. And at that level, some of them verbalize what they're thinking. If it gets too much, referees will just tell them to tone down. But no, I would probably disagree on the flip side with that statement.
On that point, who's your biggest chirper ever?
Oh, I've got to be Gregan, eh? I mean, Gregan was.
Well, there's not much
Gregan was
sort
one
of
the greatest
hesitation,
players
is there? Got to be Gregan. I say not much hesitation in your answer.
No, and I really loved him. I thought he was a really special rugby player. I refed him probably for the bulk of his career, and I didn't mind. He had a crack at me every now and again. We didn't always see eye to eye. We didn't agree, but there was always respect, and that's the way it needs to be. Now, he doesn't need to like me. I don't need to like him, but at the end of the day, there just needs to be respect. And I always found that respect was always there on the field, particularly with me and him. There were other, Mertens, as an example, was a guy that from a 10, 20 meters away used to love, his little chirps here and there. Justin Marshall was similar. There's a lot of guys. James Small, I mean, he could be 40 meters away and you could hear his voice. So there were a lot of players that I enjoyed, and I enjoy that rivalry. Blades, this is the sport that we're in. As long as it's done almost tongue in cheek in a way. I remember I refed a game in Kokstad, a friendly game between the Cheetahs and the Sharks, and Helgard Muller and James Small were having a go at each other. That they knew each other's mothers so intimately, it was scary. But always the comments were tongue in cheek, and they almost they were embracing each other as they were making the comments, which I thought was that's the way we as referees have got to embrace that kind of banter.
Yeah, I think you've got to do it too. With I know it's competitive, but you've got to embrace it with a sense of sportsmanship as well. We have a tweet from Gary Late, who is probably our most prolific tweeter.
Yes.
And Gary says, "What do you make of Poit making TMO decisions himself? Is it better as a ref to have more control or less?"
I think once again that the commentary bastardized the process, because referees have been told to own the decision if they can make it from the field. So if they have got the facility of looking at a TV screen, then the role of the TMO is to bring it up for them, and then for the referee to make the decision if he can. If he can't and he feels uncertain about it, well, then obviously he relies then on the TMO making the decision, which is fine. There is nothing wrong with that. But what we don't want is TMOs to be refereeing the game. And after all, the guys most qualified to ref the games at that level are the actual referees. So I'm actually in favor of these decisions being made on field if they can. I, for example, had some difficulty, maybe because of my age, I'm not sure, but I was reffing a game in Durban, and it was very poor conditions, and the screen was very grainy, down in Durban, because of the rain and the conditions. So I couldn't really make a decision, and relied on Sean Feltzman at one stage, which I was happy to do as well, because I think he's very experienced and he knew what I was looking for. So the decision was made on the basis of my information, which is good. That's fine. Blades, do you mind if I just switch to something that I quickly want to talk about in respect of TMO as well?
Not at all. You carry on.
In the Bulls game against the Blues, there was actually a decision made by the referee who tried to own a decision exactly the same that Gary Late speaks about, and that was the replacement prop. He tried to propel himself forward and scored a try. And so it wasn't so much about the grounding of the try. It was more about how did he get there. And I really feel that was it was a poor decision, because the player was held in a tackle and then propelled himself forward with the use of his elbow to get himself in a position to score the try, which is not allowed. It is not momentum to propel yourself forward with the use of your elbow. And so I think the Bulls would have won that game in any case, but they perhaps wouldn't have scored the bonus point try. And sometimes these moments are very important come the end of the season when teams are jockeying for position and there's only 1 or 2 points in it. So there's a case where I feel, Andrew Lees is probably the most improved referee out of all the referees on the Super Rugby panel, but it was a rank poor decision because I think most of the public forgive referees when they make bad decisions or miss things in the heat of the battle. In other words, on the hoof when they're running. But when you've got time to make a decision and you see it on a screen, in the cold light of day, I sometimes think that is that those type of decisions are very poor in context. And I think that this is a classic case of that.
Okay. Just to keep up with our interactory audience, Jonathan, Dewald Nell asks, and let me tell you, we're getting a lot of tweets here, hey? Compliment to the world's most capped international referee ever. Who was the funniest guy you ever refereed? Difficult question on a rugby field.
Difficult question. I mean, I didn't really, Blake, just from my side as well, I tried not, this was business for me. We try and make it as like sport and, may the best man win. But at the end of the day, this is a business, and it's a business for the players as well because it's their livelihood and their careers. So I tried not to be a funny man. I'm sure that I came up with every now and again, a line which was humorous, but I try to steer away from that and for the players as well. I found Andrew Hoare. I quite liked Andrew Hoare's humor because he was really a Farmer Brown kind of guy. Roll up your sleeves, get stuck in. But he was never afraid to, even in the heat of battle, to interact with the opposition and chirp them as well as he was setting the scrum. So I found him to be quite a humorous guy. Even Gregan, sometimes he had these like very cutting remarks that he used to pass, but other times he was quite a funny bloke. So, I don't really remember like a lot of funny moments on the field.
Yeah. Jono, well, we've been going for over half an hour now. One of the questions that we've been asked this morning, and one of the questions that I'm quite regularly asked is, the players get red cards and yellow cards and disciplinary things and that sort of thing. What is the modus operandi with referees?
Okay, so Blades, in all the time that I was a referee, and I had bad moments. I had games where I felt I was off the money, and it wasn't through lack of preparation or lack of desire. I just didn't sometimes hit the right mark. It didn't happen often, but there were certainly games where it did happen, and they were important games. And sometimes, one test match in particular where I felt I just had a very, very poor day. I never actually ever got dropped or shifted to a different appointment. But I do know that, referees are assessed after every single game, particularly at that level. And if you look at, I can think of a few that happened recently. You look at the Bryce Lawrence incident from 2011. The bloke reffed a poor game. By his own admission, he refereed poorly. And it wasn't so much the decisions he made, it was the ones he didn't make.
Yeah.
And that bloke, there were all these petitions, and obviously a lot of South Africans are probably still angry with him. But the reality is that he never reffed another test match, not one. So I find it quite difficult to believe that he was good enough to referee a quarterfinal of the World Cup, but then after that, not good enough ever again to referee any other test match.
Very strange.
That's what one decision. I'm not for 1 second condoning the poor performance that he had, or the implications of that for particularly the Springbok team. But I just find it quite strange that he was like that. There was Roman Poit who recently refereed the South Africa All Blacks game and didn't referee well as well. Made some poor decisions and non-decisions. And he was sidelined for a window in November now. and then has come back and refereed this Wales-England game where, once again, I take my hat off to him because I thought he refereed very well. So what the public wants sometimes, I feel, is the referee they want to see that a referee is dropped. They want to see that a referee is sidelined. It doesn't happen often because, and the simple reason is when Campese used to throw a no-look pass and it used to get intercepted or gathered by the opposition, invariably he wasn't dropped for the next game. He would undergo some remedial attention. The coaches would say to him, probably, can you try and do a little bit better in this respect? So with the franchises, with the unions, they try and work with their assets to try and improve their performance. And I think it's exactly the same, and so it should be with referees as well. If a referee is completely off form and he's refereeing badly, then there will be repercussions. Then they will ask him to step aside, and that has happened. But obviously, it's not going to happen as often as the public would want because the unions are working with their assets. SANS are working with their assets, and they're not going to summarily dismiss them.
Okay.
Just continue with that. I mean, I think sometimes the public wants to line a referee up and with a firing squad and say, right, take aim. And we can't have that. Referees are a commodity. There's not many very good ones. And so we've got to protect those very good ones, the assets. Those people, those referees from all countries around the world that make it onto those top panels internationally, they've done the hard yards. I mean, they're the best in the profession. So when they make mistakes or when they perceive to make errors, and sometimes they're not errors, then I feel that working with assets, that sort of line needs to be the predominant theme, rather than highlighting to the public, we've actually now taken this referee, we've given him 20 lashes, and hopefully his improvement will be seen in the next week. I don't really know what else the public feels should happen.
Okay, just explain to the public what does happen in terms of the judging of referees from an adjudicator point of view.
Okay, so just from a referee's perspective, obviously we've got to do the physical training, and then we preview matches in writing, and then we review them, obviously.
Preview them in writing?
We review, yeah. So it's preview, so we say... We say, like, what are we trying to achieve out of any particular game that we're refereeing, and then we review it afterwards in writing to our coach or a manager, who would then pick up on points. If we don't review it adequately, then he would say, listen, I'm not happy with the review. Could you have a look at X, Y, Z, because I feel that you've been deficient in this area. And then it's up to the referee to be honest. By and large, I think the referees do a reasonable job. I think there are some guys that try and, powder their own noses and make themselves look good. Yeah. But I think there is a fair amount of honesty. And, I'm not going to speak about those guys, but I do think guys like Chris Pollock in particular is very good with self-analysis, and he's very critical of his own performance. Much more so than any other referee. I think it's actually very humbling just to read his own reviews, to see how thorough he is in respect of his own performance and how critical he is of his errors and perceived errors. So that's what happens from a referee perspective. From a selection panel, or
hold on, can I butt in?
Of course.
During the game, just explain to our viewers and listeners what there is a guy there who has a sheet of paper, and he's ticking and crossing and adjudicating during the game, isn't he?
So at a SANZAR level, what initially used to happen is there was a shotgun range of assessors, and they were too disparate a group to really produce coherent results. So they've now made it smaller and smaller and smaller until eventually at SANZAR level, Lyndon and a few of, like it used to be, let's say Andrew Cole, Colin Hawke, and Tapa Henning. So one from each country used to do all the assessments, all of the games.
Okay,
so
yeah, right.
120 games. And those guys are all international referees. They all understand what needs to be done, and they all operate within a system. Now, the system is not perfect because the system doesn't take enough into account the players and coaches from teams. So sometimes we do miss I feel we miss some very important points that need to be discussed because we're not as player-centric as we could or should be. But that doesn't detract from the improvements that have been made in the review process. And I'm a big fan of Lyndon Breyer and the amount of changes that he's instituted in respect of trying to get referees to improve their performance. Have I answered your question?
Yeah, you have. You have.
Okay, so what happens then, Blades, is that the Lyndon will review the referee's review, and he'll write his own thoughts down, and then the referee will then look at all these ideas and thoughts, and he'll come back to Lyndon and comment on these things. And quite clearly, sometimes the referee is not. He's entitled to agree to disagree. I mean, we're talking about experts in their field, but at the same time, at the end of the day, Lyndon is going to be the big chief. So he's going to make the decisions on selection going forward. So sometimes I feel it's probably a good idea to lose some battles so that you can win the war at the end of the day.
Yeah, right. Jono, one last question from one of our regular tweeters, from Leon Petzer. Hi, Ref JK. Why can the TMO refs not be better qualified refs? They seem to be second tier, with all due respect.
Okay, so thanks for that tweet. The notion that they're second tier is not always correct. I mean, we've had Peter Marshall, who was one of Australia's best test referees ever, being a TMO. We've had Derek Bevan, who was, with Nigel Owens doing well now, but was probably one of Wales's best referees ever as well, being a TMO. I think the two South African blokes that we've got, even though they may appear to be second tier, were not actually. Dion van Blommensteen refereed many Currie Cup games, and he was an excellent Currie Cup referee. Probably, in my opinion, was taken off the South African panels way too early because he was really outstanding even at the time that he was taken off. And Sean Feltzman, did a Currie Cup final. I think it was 2003. So
yeah,
I really feel that
it's the wrong opinion.
Yeah, it's not a great opinion. I think sometimes TMOs have made some poor decisions, and like I said, I'm less forgiving of those errors because I think those are done, with a monitor in front of you where you can make a clear-cut decision.
And slow-mo conditions.
In slow-mo.
Yeah.
The referee doesn't have that facility, so he has to make a decision on the bounce. And sometimes those are difficult. Sometimes players run in your way, and at the crucial time, sometimes you're watching something 20 meters away and something happens 7 meters away from you, and you only see it out of the corner of your eye. So I have great sympathy for the assistant referees on the side of the field as well as referees who can't possibly be accurately looking at every single thing on the field. I mean, I know this. I've been a referee for 30 years, at the top flight, at the coalface for longer than anyone else dead or alive. And I'm still refereeing now, and I will be refereeing clubs and school rugby, and I know how difficult it is to do this job.
Good. Jono, okay, we said we would have you for half an hour. You've given us about 20 minutes extra of your time. Amazing how the time does fly. Taste Brits, keep your question forward next week because it's an interesting one. And for the first time, we've had the most capped referee of all time internationally in studio with us. Well, on Skype from Cape Town. Jono, great to get in touch with you again. Great to talk to you. We really look forward to interacting with you into the future. Jonathan Kaplan's going to be with us for every Monday morning, supposedly for half an hour, but I'm sure he'll give us a little extra time. Thanks, Jono. Great to talk to you, and thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Blades. It's been my pleasure, and I look forward to interacting with the public much more in the future and giving them the information that they deserve.
Fabulous. Thank you. Bye.
Cheers.
Balls balls.co.za.